Hello, I'm Stephan Schwartz, and this is part 2 of the rise of American theology and its effect on science and health. I've broken this into 2 parts because it is a very complicated issue with many effects, and I wanted to try to cover at least a key portion of them. So off we go. So what we've got is almost half of the country, as a result of the politicization of religion, don't believe in evolution. They believe God created the world in 6 days, and that humans have always been exactly as they were when they were created. Now, you would think that people would talk about that. There would be some discussion about it, some concern about it, but there isn't. Willful ignorance has 2 major manifestations: the denial of scientific facts as having no greater authority than ideology, and the effect that willful ignorance has on education. By 2006, the creationist position was affirmed by 55% of Americans. Think for a moment about what being a creationist or a biblical literalist means. For starters, this data says that more than half of Americans have discarded the hard-won knowledge accumulated so slowly over 500 years of science, essentially the age of modern science and medicine. Astrophysics, gone. Astronomy, gone. Paleontology, gone. Geology, gone. Biology, mostly gone. Genetics, gone. The general laws of physics, such as the speed of light, thought to be defective. It is impossible to believe that the Earth is 10,000 years old, that God manufactured it in 6 days, and that dinosaurs and humans once co-inhabited the planet, and accept any of these disciplines. So what we've got is a large percentage of Americans, defined almost entirely by the evangelical churches and the Republican Party, who simply don't accept science. And this has all kinds of implications. What many would think of as the crown jewels of human intellect, part of what makes it possible to be optimistic about the future, is considered from a creationist perspective to be no more valid than phrenology seems to a modern physician. That's this real dichotomy that's going on in the United States that people don't want to talk about. You don't hear politicians talking about it. How bad can this get? Here's an example. A few years ago, consider what happened at the Grand Canyon. Creationists, using the political power they wield, pressured the Bush administration to direct the Grand Canyon National Park that they must not provide an official estimate of the geological age of the canyon in order to avoid offending religious fundamentalists. The National Park Service is under orders to suspend its belief in geology, said Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility Executive Director Jeff Rush. It's as disconcerting that the official position of a national park as to the geological age of the Grand Canyon is no comment. As I say this, the impact of theocratic pressure on the educational system has been tremendous. And it's distorting public education. Not just the banning of books. I mean, unbelievable. Libraries in Florida are banning dictionaries. It's how you learn the language when you're young and you don't know words. You look them up in the dictionary. But you can't do that because the dictionaries have been taken off the shelf. In Kentucky, the Kentucky Science Education and Intellectual Freedom Act would authorize teachers to use other instructional materials to help students understand, analyze, critique, and review scientific theories. It died in committee, but versions of it have come back. The theory of creation as presented in the Bible and passages about how beings came to exist becomes the impulse that they are trying to impose on public education. It's hard to think about this because what it means is that American children who already are less literate and less able to do math and solve problems than children in other developed nations are literally being indoctrinated in misinformation. In Tennessee, they tried House Bill 368, Senate Bill 893. They introduced in both houses of the legislature would require state and local educational authorities to assist teachers to find effective ways to present the science curriculum as it addresses scientific controversies and helps students understand, analyze, and critique the scientific strengths and weaknesses of existing scientific theories in the courses. And what that really plays out is that you indoctrinate religious beliefs, not scientific beliefs. I could go on and on. Bills in Texas, bills in Oklahoma, New Mexico, Missouri. This idea of the creationist agenda, including the rejection of science and the usurpation of science education, has become a nationwide concerted political strategy. It's happening in red states all over the country. I'm not even sure how we need to get at this because politicians won't talk about it. They don't see what's going on, or if they see it, they're not willing to stand up against it. And again, you could see that in Iowa, a state where the evangelical movement is as powerful as any red state in the country. And there are many red states where it is very powerful. Now, I said in an earlier podcast, the religious right likes to moralize. But in fact, divorce is higher, unwed pregnancy is higher. There are all kinds of behaviors that politically and religiously conservative states, especially in the Red South, manifest. No one talks about compared to the country as a whole. Violence. I hear an endless number of conservatives talk about violence in New York. They don't talk about violence in Louisiana, which is worse. They talk about immigrants and the treatment of immigrants. And yet, you look at what's going on in Texas, in Florida, putting people on buses and planes and shipping them off to places they didn't want to go to, don't know about. That's okay to the conservatives and the evangelicals. Now let me talk a little bit about the health part of this, because there are all kinds of health implications. STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, are higher in red states than blue states because, among other things, they don't have sex education. So they don't teach about contraceptives. They don't teach about sexually transmitted diseases. And so you have schools where children who don't get these educational courses have all kinds of problems with sex. How about obesity? Now, how would obesity and religion be tracked? But the main finding from the researchers at Northwestern University was, our main finding was that people with a high frequency of religious participation in young adulthood were 50% more likely to become obese by middle age than those with no religious participation. And that was true even after they had adjusted for variables like age, race, gender, education, income. A study presented at a meeting of the American Heart Association following 2,400 men and women between 20 and 32 were followed for 18 years. And what they found was that those who attended religious functions at least once a week were more likely to be obese, posting a body mass index, a BMI of 30 or higher. So you have fat as a manifestation of the culture of evangelicals. Violence. As I said earlier, you hear all this conversation about how New York is so violent, and the Institute for Economics and Peace, using data compiled by the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the Centers for Disease Control, explored this issue in great depth, and they found that southern states were more violent than any other region of the country. The 10 most violent states were Louisiana, Tennessee, Nevada, Florida, Alabama, Texas, Arkansas, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and the least violent, most peaceful were Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Minnesota, North Dakota, Utah, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Iowa, Washington. And what do you notice there? Most of the violent states are red states. Most of the peaceful states are blue states. We have gotten to a point where the involvement of religion and this strange interpretation of Christianity that has evolved in the evangelical movement has become a political force that is altering American culture in many negative ways. We have got to face this for all kinds of reasons. Child mortality, maternal mortality, obesity, the rejection of science. It is producing a culture that is not what the founders intended. It is not what the Constitution lays out. And yet it has become a dominant force in the country. Oh, and I left one out. I just thought of it. Pedophilia. the sexual molestation of children. The Roman Catholic priest problem with molestation is well known, but Protestants, evangelical Protestants, it has also become a huge issue. So you have a group of people who are talking one thing, but they are living another. And they are creating in our culture an intolerance, a resentful, willfully ignorant community that is shaping who we are and what we are becoming. And in things like climate change, it is stopping us from developing the programs that we need to survive. You and I are a part of this. We may not support it, we may not agree with it, but we do need to talk about it. We need to begin talking about the fact of this willful ignorance, this obesity, this child sexuality, all of this. Because if we don't talk about it, we can't address it. And if we don't address it, we are going to become a country, it's already happening, for which other countries have a decreasing amount of respect. We're not going to be a world leader. We're going to be a country that people see as violent and stupid. That's not the America I want to live in. That's not the America I want my grandchildren to live in. What kind of country do you want your children and grandchildren to live in? We need to make a decision on the November election. And it cannot be, if we wish to prosper and focus on well-being, it cannot be Republican. Thank you.